Hello everyone, and welcome to Tommy's Reptiles. In this video, we're going to set up a fully bioactive poison dart frog enclosure with a universal rocks background. If you like Tommy's Reptiles, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. For this build, I'm going to use an enclosure that I had sitting around in my garage, and as you can see, I tried to make a fake rock background and I totally messed it up and it looks terrible. So let's rip that thing out, throw it in the garbage, and get started on the new build. I just grabbed a tape measure and I'm going to do some simple measurements to figure out the size of the universal rocks background that I'm going to need to cut out. Before I cut out the universal rocks background, I'm going to spray paint the sides and the back of this enclosure. I want to cover up the paint stains from the first attempt on this build, and I want to turn this enclosure into a small rainforest paradise. I'm putting this enclosure in my reptile room where the sides and back won't even be visible, but it just gives me a peace of mind covering it with the spray paint. All right, let's swing on over to the other side and start spray painting. And lastly, I repeated the same step on the back of the enclosure, covering everything besides the front in black. I also forgot to grab the vertical measurement. I want to make sure the rock background is above the drainage layer. And here's the amazing universal rocks background. I'm using a couple pieces of wood as a guide to cut out the measurements I made earlier. To cut the universal rocks background, I've just been using a razor blade, but you could probably use whatever you want, like scissors, a saw, a knife. I just find a razor blade is the easiest method for me. All right, let's rip it off, then clean it up. I'm gonna rinse it off with a pressure washer just to make sure I get all that dust off, and it's nice and clean for my poison dart frogs. Then I'm going to take the hose and rinse off these lava rocks because this is what I'm going to use for my drainage layer. I let the water run through the bag until no more red dust comes out. Okay, so the spray paint is dry. I brought the enclosure inside and now I'm just going to vacuum out the bottom. So I lost the drain that came with this enclosure, so I'm just going to use some suction cups and block it up. Hopefully it keeps the water from leaking out the bottom. And now I'm using that red lava rock from before as the drainage layer. I'm going to pile it up about 1.5 inches high and try to make it as level as possible. Now that the lava rocks are piled up and level, it's time to cut a window screen. To get the measurements for this cut, I just put the screen on top of the enclosure and cut around the edges. The purpose of this window screen is to act as a barrier between the drainage layer and the substrate. And trust me, you don't want any of that substrate falling into the drainage layer. So here, I'm just tucking in the window screen all along the edges of the lava rock and trying to make it level. Now let's start adding in the substrate. I like to start off in the center and then push the substrate slowly to the sides to wedge it over the screen. Now I'm simply just drilling a few holes in the top of the universal rocks background. Then I'm inserting some heavy-duty suction cups into those holes. I'm just going to try 3 suction cups, one on the left side, one on the right side, and one on the back. Well, what do you know? It worked like a charm. Now I'm just using a couple rocks to push the bottom of the background against the edge of the enclosure. After that, I'm adding another layer of damp substrate. As you can see here, I'm really piling the substrate strong on the right side. That's because I like to make different levels for my dart frogs to explore. And here, I'm putting in one of their favorite caves from their last enclosure. I like giving them a place to hide in case they get scared. And here's a universal rocks rock. Now let's put in the plants. I believe this one's called a rattlesnake plant, and this other one here is a bromeliad. And here's one of the most important steps of all, covering the forest floor with leaf litter. Here, I decided to go with some frog moss to hide those rocks a little bit and really give this enclosure a nice strong pop of green. Next, it's time to add the sphagnum moss. This stuff is perfect for hiding stuff, like edges and the suction cups that you don't want to be seen. I think that it gives this enclosure a nice cryptic look. We might as well just add another different type of moss and give this enclosure a nice spray down. Before we add the poison dart frogs, let's add the cleanup crew. It can't be a bioactive enclosure without springtails and isopods. First, let's add my Azurius poison dart frog. Look at that stunning blue color. Then let's add my green Sipilowini poison dart frog, who seems to be playing dead at the moment. And now I'll leave you guys with some footage of these poison dart frogs exploring their new enclosure, hopping on the universal rocks, and having a nice, delicious snack. I really hope that you enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching Tommy's Reptiles.